Before I tell you what happened in that house, you need to know something. I found a body that had been missing for 36 years. And that was just the beginning. I never believed in ghosts. Hell, I made fun of people who did. That was before I spent 3 nights trapped in the Blackwood Manor, before I saw things that shouldn't exist, and before I learned that some houses don't just want to be sold, they want to keep you. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I've been a real estate agent for 12 years. I've seen it all. Crack houses, murder scenes, places where people died alone and weren't found for months. Nothing ever bothered me. But the Blackwood Manor? That place didn't just scare me, it hunted me, and it's still hunting. It started on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning in October 2023. My boss Jerry walked into my office with a manila folder that he held like it might explode. His face was pale and his hands were actually shaking. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to look at something. But first, promise me you'll hear me out before you say no." That should have been my first warning. Jerry had never asked me to promise anything before. I opened the folder and saw photographs of what looked like a Victorian mansion from a nightmare. 3 stories of rotting wood and broken dreams, with windows so black they seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. "Let me guess," I said, trying to keep things light. "The spooky house nobody wants to buy." Jerry's laugh was hollow. 6 agents have tried to sell it in 8 years. 6, Sarah. Want to know what happened to them? I nodded, though something in his tone made my stomach clench. 3 quit the business entirely. 1 had a nervous breakdown. 1 moved across the country and won't return my calls. And the last one, Jerry paused. The last one is in a psychiatric facility. She keeps talking about voices in the walls and footsteps that follow you home. But here's what Jerry didn't tell me that day, and what I only found out later. He'd been in that house himself once, for exactly 17 minutes, and he'd been having nightmares ever since. The property details read like a real estate agent's dream, if you could ignore the history. Built in 1887 by railroad magnate Edmund Blackwood, 12 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, 15 acres, and a price that had been slashed so many times it was practically free. "What's the catch?" I asked, though I was already afraid of the answer. "The last owner died in the house," Jerry said quietly. "Marcus Blackwood Jr. They found his car at the bottom of Miller's Pond in 1987, but..." He swallowed hard. "But his body was never in it." I felt something cold crawl up my spine. "What do you mean?" "The car was empty, Sarah. Doors were locked from the inside, windows up, keys in the ignition, but no body. It was like he just vanished." What Jerry also didn't mention was that Marcus wasn't the first Blackwood to disappear. There had been others. And according to the old police reports I found later, they all had one thing in common. They were last seen walking toward the house on the night they vanished. I should have walked away. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to walk away, but the commission on a sale like this would set me up for years. And I was curious, fatally curious. The drive to the property took 45 minutes through winding country roads that got narrower and darker with each mile. The GPS lost signal about 10 miles out, and I had to follow hand-drawn directions that Jerry's assistant had copied from a map that looked older than I was. When I finally saw the house, I understood why people called it cursed. The Blackwood Manor didn't just sit on the landscape, it dominated it. Like a cancer growing out of the earth, all twisted spires and impossible angles that hurt to look at. The trees around it were dead, their branches reaching toward the house like desperate fingers. But it was the silence that really got to me. No birds. No insects, no wind. Just an oppressive quiet that made my ears ring. I parked in what used to be a circular driveway and sat in my car for a full 5 minutes, staring at the front door. It was massive, solid oak with stained glass panels that showed scenes I couldn't quite make out in the fading light. But I swear I saw shapes moving behind that glass, shadows that didn't match anything in the empty foyer beyond. The key turned easily, too easily, like the house wanted me to come in. The smell hit me the moment I opened the door, sweet and floral but with an undertone of decay that made my stomach lurch. It was the smell of flowers left too long on a grave. The foyer was grand but wrong somehow. The marble floor was spotless despite decades of abandonment. The dust motes in the air moved in patterns that defied physics, swirling in spirals that spelled out shapes I almost recognized. I clicked on my flashlight and started taking pictures, but the camera kept malfunctioning. The flash would fire randomly, illuminating corners I wasn't aiming at. And in those brief moments of light, I saw things. Furniture that wasn't there a second before, portraits on walls that should have been bare, hand shadows that moved independently of their sources. The main floor was a maze of rooms that seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking. I'd walk through a doorway into what should have been the dining room, only to find myself back in the foyer. Doors that had been open slammed shut behind me. Others appeared where walls had been moments before, and then I heard the footsteps, not upstairs. Right behind me, I spun around, heart hammering, flashlight cutting through the darkness. Nothing. But in the dust on the floor, clear as day, were footprints. Fresh footprints that led from the front door to exactly where I was standing. They weren't my footprints. Hello? I called out, my voice echoing strangely in the cavernous space. Is someone there? The footsteps started again, circling me now. Left, right, behind, in front. I spun in circles, the flashlight beam dancing wildly, but I saw nothing. Nothing but more footprints appearing in the dust, forming a perfect circle around me. That's when the whispers started. Voices, dozens of them, coming from the walls themselves. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was urgent, desperate. They were trying to tell me something. Warn me about something. I ran for the front door, but it wouldn't open. The handle turned, but the door was sealed shut as if it had been welded closed. I threw my weight against it, screaming now, but it didn't budge. I was trapped. And something in that house was very, very happy about it. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in as many seconds. My breath came out in white puffs as the whispers grew louder, more insistent. And underneath it all, I heard something else. Laughter. Cold, cruel laughter that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The lights came on by themselves. Not electric lights. The power had been cut off years ago. These were older. Candles. Dozens of candles throughout the house, all igniting simultaneously with an impossible blue flame that cast dancing shadows on every wall. In that flickering light, I saw them. The previous owners, all of them, standing in doorways on the staircase, floating near the ceiling. Their faces were pale and drawn, their eyes black holes of despair. And they were all pointing toward the stairs. They were trying to tell me something. Something about what was waiting for me on the second floor. I climbed those stairs because I had no choice. Every step creaked under my weight, and with each creak the whispers grew louder. By the time I reached the landing, they had become a roar, voices screaming warnings, pleading with me to turn back, telling me I was already too late. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, lined with portraits of the Blackwood family. But as I walked past them, their eyes followed me, and their expressions changed. Sad faces became angry. Welcoming smiles turned to snarls of rage. The first bedroom door stood open. Inside I could see a child's room, perfectly preserved from the 1950s. Toys on the floor, clothes in the closet, a bed that looked like it had just been slept in. But the child in the photograph on the nightstand kept changing. One moment it was a smiling boy. The next, a corpse with hollow eyes and a mouth open in an eternal scream. The second door was locked, but I could hear something behind it. Scratching like fingernails on wood, like someone was trying to claw their way out. I pressed my ear to the door and heard breathing, slow, labored breathing. And then a voice so faint I almost missed it. Help me, please, I've been trapped in here for so long. My hand was on the doorknob before I could stop myself. It was ice cold, so cold it burned. But as I started to turn it, every other voice in the house screamed at once, "Don't open that door." I jerked my hand back like I'd been shocked. The breathing stopped. The scratching stopped, and in the sudden silence I heard footsteps coming up the stairs behind me. Heavy footsteps, purposeful, angry. I turned around and saw him. Marcus Blackwood Jr., or what was left of him. His clothes were rotted and stained. His skin was grey and mottled, and his eyes were holes filled with malevolent red light. He smiled at me and his teeth were black. "Welcome home," he said in a voice like grinding bones. "You're going to love it here forever." That's when I realized the truth. The house wasn't haunted. It was hunting. It had been luring people in for decades, feeding on their fear, their despair, their very souls. And Marcus wasn't a victim, he was the bait. I ran. God help me. I ran toward the only place I could think of, the tower room. The stairs were narrow and steep, and behind me I could hear Marcus laughing, taking his time because he knew I had.